Hello, everybody. My name is Eric Spry. I am the Bureau's Program Manager for HMDA Operations, and I'm excited to moderate the afternoon publications track. If you are looking for publications track, we've got some great presentations today. You're in the right place. Stay put. We also have the submissions track, and if you're looking for those presentations, go to your WebEx invite and click on the other WebEx link. We'll give folks just 30 seconds or so to get shuffled over before we get started. And while we're waiting to get started, just a note to my presenters and to my judges, you have 20 minutes to present. That's your time to present. Our recommendation is that you take 10 minutes for your presentation and allow 10 minutes for questions from the judges. When you get into 8 minutes, I'll put up a sign that looks like this, a big 8. When you get to 10 minutes, I'll put up a big 10. Again, presenters, this is your time, but we do like to encourage time for judges to ask questions. And judges, when we get to the Q&A, I'll ask you to use the raised hand button and I'll call on you in order as best I can keep track of it. With that, I think we are ready for Team ICF. Jeremy, would you like to kick things off?
Super. Thank you, Eric. And as you can see here, we have a team represented by Team ICF and also a partnership with Josh Silver from the NCRC. So we have Jackie, Avni, Kaipong, Michael, and Josh on the phone, or on the line with all of us today. And I'm going to turn it over to Josh right now to begin to talk about our problem statement and what we were solving for this week.
Good afternoon. I want to thank ICF Next for having me on their team this week, and also the CFPB. One of the statutory purposes of HMDA is to assist public sector officials in directing public investment or subsidies in such a manner as to stimulate private sector lending and investment in neighborhoods in need of credit and capital. This statutory purpose is often overlooked, but remains vitally important. We will create a tool that will describe patterns of public sector investment and subsidies from 2 major Department of Housing and Urban Development programs, the Home Investment Partnership Program and the Community Development Block Grant Program. We will look at data on the census tract level and compare the public subsidies to private sector lending as revealed by the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data. Next slide. Key questions to be addressed is, does the public and private sector funding rise and fall together? In other words, does the public sector subsidies serve as a pump, priming or stimulating private sector lending on a census tract level, particularly in neighborhoods experiencing economic distress or low levels of lending? The federal government has a special responsibility to do this. Unfortunately, it was the federal government in the 1930s that invented redlining. There was a federal agency that contracted with appraisers to go out and to rate neighborhoods based on risk. And long story short, the appraisers rated communities of color often as the riskiest neighborhoods. Lenders took note, redlined, and refused to lend in these neighborhoods. Today, many of these neighborhoods continue to experience economic disadvantage. This occurred across the country, but we're going to focus a little bit on Richmond, Virginia, where unfortunately this also occurred. I now turn it back over to my colleagues.
Thanks, Josh. So Josh kind of laid out this problem statement for us, and what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to switch my screen here. Give me 1 second. And I'm going to flip over to our application. So what you see right here is we developed a tool to begin to capture some of the HMDA data and combine it with the HUD data that Josh referenced earlier. So what you see in front of you is HMDA data for the year 2019 for the state of Virginia. And we've taken a look across racial and ethnic lines. Now, we heard the acting director this morning talk a little bit about that important distinction of looking at racial disparities. And that was the first place we looked when we started to manipulate the data. So you can see here what we can do is take a look specifically at Virginia, and then we can start sorting by loan type, and we can start sorting by race as well. So let's say I go ahead and remove white and race not available, and we just focus solely on these distinct racial minorities, and we look solely at FHA loans as an example. So you could see you could begin to kind of isolate the data set and get a little bit more granularity in terms of loans that were lending in 2019 in the HMDA data in Virginia. So taking that lens and beginning to look there, what we did after that was start to look specifically at Richmond, Virginia, and went ahead and looked at both the HUD data. So you can see what we've done here on this bottom graph is taking a look at HMDA, the dollar amounts per capita by census tract, and then aligning those dollar amounts by census tract with the CDBG funding from HUD and the home buyer and homeowner funding. Now this correlates with what Josh was talking about in our problem statement, where what we wanted to start doing was matching that public sector investment with private sector lending as well. And when we take that kind of a look, we can begin to start to draw some correlations. And we envision in the future this could be used to look at year-over-year trends, to look at rates of increase, rates of decrease, and to begin to focus on areas of opportunity. So here we also have, again, making a comparison and looking at lower to moderate income tracts in the home and with home and CDBG funding, and lower to moderate income tracts without that home and CDBG funding, and starting to compare some of those ratios when we look at the media HMDA single family loans per 100 owner occupied units. And you can begin to, again, draw some of those correlations between public sector and private sector funding. The last thing I'll take a look at here, and this was part of our team's process that Jackie will be talking about in a moment, but what we were able to do is start to look at the HMDA data by zip code. And so again, one of our process was to actually plot a lot of these graphs in Tableau, use that tool as a way to rapidly prototype. And then we went ahead and put the prototypes into this HTML and JavaScript based front end. So with that, what I'm going to do is go back to our slides, restart the slideshow, and I'm going to have Jackie talk to our process. Jackie?
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. So our process to develop the solution was a collaborative effort. Our team consisted of me, Josh, developers, data engineers, interface designers, and project manager. Step one was to identify the business problem. With help of Josh, we quickly identified our problem statement in the publications track. It was to build data analytic tools to compare private sector investment versus public sector spending. The next step was to identify the data sets. Along with private sector investment data from HMDA, we downloaded CDBG, home, and census tract datasets. HMDA file for 2019 was 7 GB. So instead of dealing with large datasets, we decided to refine our problem statement and focus only on Richmond MSA census tracts. Data in these datasets were at different granularities. We prepared and processed the data using tools such as Excel and other ETL tools. We did quick visualization prototypes in Tableau to have realistic views. We then built visualizations per CFPB specifications and guidelines using open source libraries such as React and Chart.js. That's what Jeremy showed you. Those were the ones built in React and Chart. In the future, our team thought of improving the solution by building a data pipeline that will programmatically retrieve these data sets and produce accurate visualizations real time. All along, we followed agile methodology, collaborating periodically and making incremental changes. Back to you, Jeremy. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. So we wanted to kind of evaluate ourselves against some of the CFPB guidelines as well, and take a look at how we were going to do this. We had a real opportunity with Josh joining our team, and I think that collaboration allowed us to focus in this direction, and for with his guidance, really understanding the lens that he wanted that we were trying to put on it in terms of understanding both the HUD data and the HMDA data in the context of that public and private funding. So that really kind of made our approach a bit more distinctive in terms of what we did with the HMDA data. And I realized, in a week, we don't have a ton of time to make this happen. And so we wanted to be very focused. But ideally, we would look into the future to do a couple of things. We would obviously increase the scope in terms of where we would look beyond Richmond, but then also be able to do some things that allowed us to look both at trends year over year and across jurisdictions, across geographies, and even across data sets. So we did look at 2 data sets from HUD, but we know that there would be other opportunities to, again, expose that opportunity for both public sector financing and opportunities for where, based on the current HMDA data, where private sector funding is either robust or where there's an opportunity for it to increase with some public sector work. So with that, I will end our presentation, and we will be glad to take some questions as a team.